All right, I'm
okay,
I'm good to go.
I'll count us down. 3, 2, 1.
I gotta say, it's a really, really good change of pace to be talking about something as generally bright and shiny as Arthur, like right after I've been watching Cheer on Netflix. You want to talk about maybe one of the most depressing and upsetting and saddening shows that I've ever watched in my entire life. Like anything in media, it's Cheer.
Will, I hate to sound like a bad comedian, but I'm currently watching a little show called CNN, and very very similar emotions are being brought out of me. I think depressing is the operable word here.
It feels like we've been basket tossed up into the air and not having been caught for the 5th time.
Exactly. That's what it feels like, not getting those Iowa caucus results for 48 hours.
Oh my god.
I think we've discovered this Cheer CNN crossover. Two sides of the same coin. Emotionally.
The C stands for Cheer News Network. Welcome everybody. This is Elwood City Limits. We're going to try our best, despite the circumstances around us, to be nice and bright and sunny, because of course we are talking about Arthur, being the episodic Arthur podcast. This is Will Young, and with me as always, as most times, Lucas Mancini.
I'm always with you in your heart. That's why you said that.
In spirit. Yeah, and it's been we're in the blahs of January right now. No, we're not. It's in February.
Yeah, we're
past
it's over.
it.
Listen. I know January was uniquely long. I feel like a year's worth of stuff happened in January, but we're in the throngs of Aquarius season, baby. It's February, more like Funuary. Things are looking up, Will.
That's right. You're at your most powerful right before Lucas Mancini Day.
I'm charging up.
And I also do have a bit of good news to share in terms of Arthur itself. Might as well start off with this one. It came out on their Twitter They announced on their Twitter last week, Arthur, the TV series, won a Parents' Choice Gold Award, mainly for the show, for how it kind of promotes itself and the way it tackles issues, but also a special mention to Mr. Rapper and the Special Someone. So despite the kind of controversy that happened when that first came out, it's getting a lot of recognition for the steps that it took, the show.
Yeah, it feels like we're finally kind of, that's kind of bookending the saga of Mr. Rapper and the Special Someone. Sort of the journey we've been on with that episode in terms of it being banned and that sort of thing. This is a good period in that chapter.
Yes, and it's a really great way to be able to say that they did the right thing, and in the end, the right people kind of won. And continue to win, because I don't know if the GLAAD Media Awards have come out yet, but that's another big one. Congratulations to Arthur, as always. Felt like we should mention that here. And of course, before we begin talking about this episode in Season 9, we're going to head on over to the Elwood City Limits Mailbag. Last week was an all mailbag show, and this week it's going to be not all mailbag, but we do have still a couple. See, you guys always like to give us a little something. I always like looking into a couple of new messages right after a brand new episode in the mailbag. So let's go over there, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Our first one comes in from KL, who says, "It makes me really happy that you guys have taken such a liking to George, because he's my favorite character. Unfortunately, I wouldn't say he becomes a true main character until around season 13. Not that you guys don't still have some great George episodes to look forward to in the meantime. An interesting little note, in your podcast covering The Boy with His Head in the Clouds, you point out that George and Binky both wear orange button-down shirts. But in Desk Wars, they're also both wearing the exact same color shirt. I didn't notice while actually watching the episode, but when I saw a screen cap of them next to each other in the episode, I caught it. Not a super important detail, just a bit of trivia." Yeah, I'd say that George has wormed his way into both of our hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've always kind of been even at his most annoying, like at the peak of Wally George, I've always kind of been a George stan.
He's a good kid, and I appreciate. He also brings a list of like new topics you can talk about. It's just nice to kind of mix up the cast, and I think it seems.
Yeah, he's very different than all the other kids.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that they do eventually that they keep doing. And right now, George seems to be one of the kind of new faces that they're pushing on the brand. Next up, this one is from Michelle, who says, greetings from New Jersey. I discovered your podcast in July last year. I've been listening and catching up ever since. I wanted to let you guys know that during the summer, I had a job where I had to walk around all day and put flyers on cars. It might sound pretty dull, but your podcast made it anything but. Actually, that doesn't sound too bad. Like, if you have a good long podcast you're listening to and you got some good running shoes on, like, you got a long place to walk, that doesn't sound all that bad.
Summertime in New Jersey. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, easy for us to say from the comfort of our climate-controlled rooms, but...
Mine's not so much climate-controlled as there is, like, duct tape on the window. That's the kind of climate control I'm living with.
Canadian climate control.
I'm sure people must have thought I looked silly laughing out loud to myself as I walked around with flyers, so thank you very much for making my work days go by so fast. I know you covered this literally years ago now, but I had to let you know how hilarious I thought Lucas's impression of Barack Obama was when you covered Arthur's Sleepover. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, I didn't realize I did a Barack Obama in that episode. It's funny hearing about the jokes from, like, really far back. I had a friend of the show, Justin, listens to the show at his job, and he was telling me that at some point this is going to come as a big surprise, Will. At some point we were doing Bane impressions. I know, it doesn't sound like me or you at all, and that really tickled him.
I'll have to take a listen back to that episode, Arthur's Sleepover. I also wanted to touch on the episode where Francine gets Nemo. Since you talk about the animal hierarchy so much, I was so looking forward to you commenting on something that has bothered me ever since I was a child, but you seem to not notice it. When Arthur is talking to Buster and Brain about how he thinks all cats are stupid, I was shocked both as a child and an adult because Sue Ellen and Jenna are cats. What the heck, Arthur and writers?
Man.
Oh, I forget that they're cats. Like, I don't know. There's some of these characters that I still look at and be like, yeah, that's just Sue Ellen. Like, I don't think about the fact that it's just like, oh, Arthur's an aardvark, Brain's a bear, Buster's a bunny. Like, maybe that's because I never really thought about it, but it's just like, yeah, actually, Jenna and Sue Ellen are cats. Oops.
Especially the pointy-eared ones. It's like they could be a cat, they could be a fox. Buster said something recently about he hates an animal, right? And I think we pointed it out then that it's really odd.
Oh, maybe. I don't remember.
I feel like I feel like writing down the note, is Buster racist? Recently, because he was talking about a specific animal he didn't like, and it was like, bro, that's some of your friends, dog.
Another thing I want to mention is that I'm the same age as you, Will, and I definitely watched Teletubbies when it came out. I was super embarrassed at being way too old to watch it as well, but I think as an adult, I realized that it's because I love innocence and find things like that charming. To this day, when I'm having bad anxiety, I definitely still put on My Neighbor Totoro as one of my other childhood faves, as well as one of my other childhood faves, Little Bear. Now, Little Bear is one I haven't watched in a long time.
I actually really had no offense about this guy's taste. I mean, I love Totoro. That's truly one of my favorite movies ever. Period.
I haven't seen it.
Little Bear is. I really disliked Little Bear even as a kid. I found him annoying.
It's a very toothless little show. Like, even for a children's show, he was always a little too polite, a little too well-spoken, like...
Yeah. I always that's what I disliked about Franklin as well. I even as a kid, I had a distaste for some reason. It's weird to say that Arthur has, like, an edge to it, but I guess there's, like... not Arthur himself, but there's characters in Arthur who are kind of rude. You know what I mean? There's a little bit more going on where, yeah, I think toothless is the right way to describe. Though I did like, what was the guy with the scarf who would in the hot air balloon? I feel like that's kind of like the same tier as Little Bear, and I loved that show. Gosh, what is that called?
Rupert?
Rupert, yes, I liked Rupert.
I was a huge fan of Rupert.
Shouts out to, African King Babar.
Yes.
Oh, Babar's a homie.
Love Babar.
Shouts out to Babar. Oh, yeah, Babar rules. But yeah, something Little Bear always kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Interesting. So a new thing that I've been doing, and I recently was speaking to a friend of the show, DJ Bob, and we were talking about how I was talking about the fact that we have the new Patreon show that will be coming out with its first episode very soon, the one where we're talking about PBS Kids shows. and I kind of got excited because I started thinking about all of the shows that aired on PBS, and I was like, oh my god, I can't wait to talk about this one and this one. So you said like Little Bear and Franklin, and I'm like, as we're speaking, I'm just like, okay, Little Bear did not air on PBS, so we're not talking about that one. Franklin didn't air on PBS, which if you had asked me, I probably would have said yes. And now I'm just checking to see if Babar was aired on PBS.
No, I feel like these are all, and this is not going to make any sense to the Americans out there listening, but these are all like Treehouse TV staples.
Yeah.
I feel like the reason I've seen these shows is because they were Treehouse shows, and my sister was more of a Treehouse kid, where I had already graduated to. I think I went directly from, I skipped Treehouse. I think kind of the hierarchy is that you start with PBS. That's like when you're really, really young.
Yeah.
And then when you're maybe like six to 7-ish, you're watching Treehouse. 5, 6, 7 watching Treehouse, and then from 8 on, once you discover YTV, there's no going back.
Well, and I'm old enough to remember that when Treehouse TV first came on, and I was just a little bit too old for it, but I still watched it a little bit. And this is actually interesting, the coverage of these three shows. So Little Bear was the Canadian era was Teletoon. Franklin was Treehouse TV, and Babar was CBC. So,
Whoa!
So that's what we would watch.
Hey, that makes the broadcast of record. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Canadians recognize the king. That is, you know what? Will?
Yes.
Babar going on the list of kings.
Oh,
It's happening right now, live on the show. We are adding Babar to the list of kings.
Who are some of the newer additions since we first premiered this idea?
The list of kings. I'm trying to remember. Who was on? I feel like we stopped at Binky Barnes last time.
Yeah,
so
I think you freshly added him.
Fans of the show could go back and if you look on my Twitter, you could see the full list of kings. So last time we checked in, it was Binky Barnes. We've since added quite a few. Jackie Chan, Muhammad Ali, Howard Ratner, the main character of Uncut Gems, Luigi. Maybe you've heard of him. He's one of the Mario brothers. Tanner Zipkin from the Cineplex pre-show.
Z. Yeah.
Tanner Z, rest in power to my mans. He's not dead, but he was fired. I stand with Tanner. This is a controversial one. Austin Powers is on the list of kings.
Okay.
Actor Armie Hammer on the list of kings.
All right.
I think it's because he tweeted some anti-war tweet that I thought was really, really dope, and so that's why he got
Good
added.
Good lad.
On the other side, there's Vegeta.
Oh yeah, that
makes
makes
sense. Of kings.
Yeah.
The Safdie brothers, directors of Uncut Gems.
Uncut Gems.
David Lynch. Another, we talk about him all the time.
Classic.
Another controversial one coming up. Sigmund Freud was added to the list of kings.
Why? Why was he added?
I was having a conversation with someone. It's not gonna do it. Arnold Schwarzenegger added to the list of kings specifically for that video where he talks about how much he likes smoking his stogie
his
house.
stogies.
Yes, he doesn't.
Nobody
have to find
can tell me that
place.
I can't smoke my stogies. Because I'm a big man and I can do what I want.
Yeah, he doesn't have to find a hiding place like you.
Like you.
Director John Carpenter on the list of kings.
Good lad.
Captain Picard, list of kings edition. This one I don't know the guy's name. I just wrote down the author of The Witcher because he did that awesome interview where he's like, "Yeah, I don't like working that much."
Yes, I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, and now Babar.
I feel like this is as much a representative of the inside of your mind, your mind's Lucas Mancini. It's just like,
well, it's not anybody else's Hall of Kings. It's mine.
That's true. It's just a real unfiltered look at like the people that you respect and idolize. So yeah, there's your update on Lucas's Hall of Kings. Let's finish off Michelle's email here. Thank you very much. If I can just say one more thing, I super hope that you guys don't hate me for this, but please take note that the word familiar is pronounced the way I just said, familiar, and not familiar. From listening to the podcast a couple times a week for the past 7 months, I noticed that you guys say that a ton, and it makes me cringe every time. I love you guys so much, and I love the podcast. I'm just super big on correct grammar and punctuation. Okay, so this I was not aware of.
Familiar. I do say familiar.
Okay. It's just something that you get used to, I suppose.
I believe that, I could be wrong on this, and we both just happen to have bad grammar in this sense, but I think this might be a local colloquialism. I think this might be
maybe
our East Coast accents coming out.
Yeah, it's definitely
familiar.
Yeah, it's just something that I never even noticed, so I will try my best.
Jimmy McDaniel, bud, he's friggin' familiar, right? I'm going down colder than the causeway out there, right? But he's got 2 hooks.
Okay, now it's starting to sound like the audiobook of The Lighthouse or something.
Oh, yeah, buddy, you got my 4x4 from Timmy's. Don't talk to me till I got my 4x4 from Timmy's. You gotta be right familiar, right?
I seen
We're
you.
down.
I seen you like my lobster. I know that you do.
Where you two? You eat yet? No, Jude, you wanna?
I feel like this is just every regional accent mixed up into one.
What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, Kenny's Pizza, bud. Kenny's Pizza. An appley. No, I'm more of an appley guy.
All right.
Yeah, I could say all kinds of words wrong.
We got one more here from Jordy from Southern California. SCU. I found the Elwood City Limits podcast on the Arthur subreddit a few months ago, and I've been binging it in my commute to and from work. I'm very, very behind. Episode 37, 2017. Well, good luck to you. But I think I can catch up soon because I'm enjoying it so much. I have something to bring up. Maybe this will be brought up in later episodes, but episode 36, the Crazy Bus episode, Played Again DW. You speculated that Arthur's parents might be in their mid-40s, judging by the CD they are bringing to the party. Although it does look like it says 1970, it actually says 1978. If you look closely, the last digit is not a 0. It's in fact an 8 because the disco ball underneath the top circle makes the 8 shape, and they attached a screenshot. To further back my argument, disco didn't fully hit the mainstream until the mid to late 1970s. In other Arthur episodes, you also see pictures of Jane and David Reed in disco outfits as well. By doing the math, if Arthur's parents were 18 in 1978 and the episode aired in 1997, sort of, this would make Arthur's parents around 37 years old, so just in their late 30s. I think it makes more sense since his parents don't look like they are in their 40s. In the podcast episode, Will, you were right, they looked younger than 40. All right, so a little bit of sleuthing from our eagle-eyed listeners.
No, I like that, and you know what? I think that all fits.
Yeah, I agree.
I will say this though: the way they animate the adults in Arthur, it's pretty hard to tell the difference between like a 35-year-old and a 40-year-old. Like I suppose that like for instance, there's I feel like all the adults are just kind of adult and then they're elderly, right? Like Grandma Thora, the Tibbles, the grandma, those are elderly people.
Yes.
And I guess like Mr. Haney is probably is older than Dad Reed, probably. Like, Mr. Haney's probably in his late 40s, early 50s, possibly. Mm-hmm. But that's just because he's just kind of, like, an unhealthy guy. Like, how old is, like, Muffy's dad supposed
But we see
to
him
be?
Exercising so much. Like,
that's true,
all of those,
Will. You're right.
A lot of those cutaways are him exercising. And, hey, that has to do with the episode that we're talking about.
That's right.
And, all right, we're going to get into it in just a sec, but, of course, we can't do that without saying thank you to the people who keep us here. And
okay, so this is what I was going to interrupt you about before.
Yes, please do.
How many Patreon subscribers are we currently at?
31.
31. Okay, people. The Sonic Hedgehog movie's coming out pretty soon.
Yeah, so not to interrupt your hard sell here, Lucas. I want you to hard sell, but like clock's ticking here, and it's time. Like there has literally never been a better time to subscribe to the Elwood City Limits Patreon. Tell them why, Lucas.
Well, it's because right now it's February 5th. The Sonic the Hedgehog movie comes out as soon as February 13th. Now, we don't have to go see it day one, so you have a little bit more time than that. But I believe, is it 45 is the threshold, Will?
I think it's actually 40.
It's 40? We are 9 people away from you guys making Will go see the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Now, you don't have to worry about me seeing it. I'm going to see it in theaters regardless. But Will has gone on the record saying he will not step foot into a theater and pay Earth dollars for a ticket to the Sonic the Hedgehog film unless you make him by subscribing to the Patreon so we could get to our goal of 40 Patreon subscribers so we could release the Patreon exclusive episode where we watch the Sonic the Hedgehog movie and review it. So if you want to see that happen, which I know you all do, and even if you don't want to see it, just know that I want to see it happen and do it for me. Okay, so if you want to force Will against his will to see the Sonic the Hedgehog film, the clock is ticking. We're we're 8 days away from this movie coming out, and sure, it's going to be in theaters for a little bit, but all you got to do is tell 9 friends to subscribe to the Patreon. Hey, make a separate email address. Pay for it yourself. I don't care. As long as we get 40 people, poor Will is going to have to watch the Sonic movie.
You're darn tootin', and I'm telling you this, it's not going to happen if you guys don't make it happen. So, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to do this because...
Yeah. You're going to hear my thoughts on the movie regardless.
Okay.
I'm going to be in there day one, but yes, Will is not going to do it.
No, I'm not. Like, you can't make me. Like, there are...
Well,
you know what? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see Birds of Prey twice, and I'm not going to tell anybody about it if we don't hit 40. No, but seriously, like, if we don't hit 40 patrons by, like, I don't know, I'm guessing Sonic's probably going to be in theaters for the rest of February. But if we don't hit 40 patrons, then I'm not going to go see it, and we're not going to talk about it. In fact, I'm going to just... Lucas, do not talk about Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie... on the podcast if we don't hit 40 patrons.
No.
You
hear that, people? This is Will. Will's the boss here. I would love to talk about the Sonic the Hedgehog movie on the podcast, guys. I've talked about it enough already. I haven't even seen the darn thing.
If we are going to talk about it, we're not going to talk about it on the show. That's it. Like, I'm laying it down right now. But this is the thing, and I know I already kind of did the hard sell for this last week if you listened to that episode, so I'll keep this really brief. There's never been a better time to be on the Patreon because we're going to be coming out with our brand new show coming up next week, and near the end of the show, we'll talk a bit more about that with Lucas here, but there's going to be all kinds of new exclusive content, and if we do get to 40 patrons, absolutely, I'll go see Sonic the Hedgehog movie. We'll do a separate patrons-only podcast about that. So,
and again, if you've already subscribed to the Patreon, I believe you have access to our previous time we did this, which was the Pokemon movie, the Detective Pikachu movie, and that was a lot of fun.
That's right. Yeah, no, I actually ended up really liking Detective Pikachu, so I'm glad that I went to see that. Who knows? Maybe I'd be glad to see Sonic the Hedgehog, but we won't know unless you guys do something about that. Anyway, yeah, I feel like we've been kind of we set that goal a long time ago, and I feel like we've been kind of remembering it here and there, and now's the time. This is the final call to action here of just like, you want me to torture myself? I'll do it. For money. Anyway, that's it, guys.
Well, there's a baby Sonic in the movie. There's baby Sonic.
Oh, God, please. All right. Either way, no matter what, we have some wonderful patrons who have been here, some of them since day one, and others a bit newer. So let's say thank you to them. That'd be Aaron DeFilippo and Alex, Caitlin Harrington, Chandler LaFave Boaton, Christine Wong, Sierra S., Dan, Mike Dawson Silva, Emily K., Froppy, Ian Collis, Jake Bailey, Joe Sue, John Dulong, and John Griswold, Kat, Kaylin Krogall, Kevin Noon, Kristen, Leanne S., Light Relentless, Macy Ball, Marlo Stanfield, Matt, who is our brand new patron. Jeez, this language. Welcome, Matt, and thank you. Michaela Gibson, Pretty Cool Stairs, Rachel Pearson, Riley Stevens, Shayna Bennett, Stella, Teresa, and William. Thank you, everybody. All right, I really am interested to get into this episode. So this is Arthur Weighs In. And in case you were wondering, yes, it does have to do with Arthur's weight. In fact, that's kind of where we start off. We start off at a carnival sideshow. It's called Big Bob's Big Top, and he's showing off some of his wares. He's got.
At first, I thought Big Bob was Cresblaine.
He does kind of have the same getup, doesn't he?
Yeah, I at first, and also because there's some other, some characters from Arthur's past here. We have Pickles the Clown has been rehired at Big Bob's Big Top.
Yeah, and Big Bob has got some sights like the Poughkeepsie Pumpkin, which is heavier than what is it? I think he uses like a car or something. Yeah, like a shaggin' wagon, like a VW van. He's got the Minnewaski meteorite, which is this enormous meteorite that is also magnetic. And then finally, the leaden lump of Elwood City, which is this misshapen, strangely familiar blob of yellow, blue, and tan. And it starts to move, and he's just like, everybody run! And it turns out that it's actually the first Arthur meme alert of this episode, one of many. It's Fat Arthur, the Blob.
We haven't had an Arthur meme alert. I feel like most of the Arthur meme alerts were front-loaded in like the first 3 seasons. It's been a while since we've had an Arthur meme alert, but I do remember seeing this visage of Arthur in this state, this Clive Barkian horror that is the lead and lump Arthur.
Yeah, I have no Arthur and I must scream over here. He's just this kind of essentially this blob, and he's like, no, it's it's just me, Arthur, everybody. But that's the only introduction we get, so it's a little bit vague as to what we're going to be getting into. So we start off. Arthur is rehearsing for a play, and he's trying to sound scared. Again, we've always talked about how difficult it must be for the voice actors on the show to sound like they're acting poorly.
and there's some of that. There's not only some of that in the first episode, but there's also the next episode we're talking about. Lots of good voice actors pretending to be bad actors.
Yeah. So Arthur's having a bit of trouble getting it down, and DW puts her 2 cents in. She's completely the other way. If Arthur is, I don't want to say Keanu Reeves because I don't think he's a bad actor, but if Arthur's Hayden Christensen, then DW is Kenneth Branagh. She's completely hamming it up, which I think is totally appropriate for her character. But Arthur is also having trouble with the fact that he needs to wear a suit for the role that he's in, and none of his like fancy pants are fitting him. He's trying to zip it up, and it's like, trust me, we're gonna get into it, but like I've been in this situation before where it's like I can almost get the zipper up, but that button ain't going anywhere. So in fact, it almost takes DW out. So they have to go and buy new suit pants at the mall, and they end up going to like a clothing section. Arthur, none of the pants fit him, so they actually have to go to the husky corner of the children's clothing store.
So a couple of things about this. First of all,
yeah.
they get the waist measuring tape out. When was the last time you saw that in a clothing store?
Probably when I went to get a suit fitted for my wedding.
Yeah, I guess it's different than it's dress pants. I was gonna say at first I was a little bit unclear of like what kind of pants these were. If these were just jeans, I'm like, homie, just go up a size.
Yeah, really.
But I suppose it's a little bit, different. Like when it's like formal wear. The sizes are different. It's funny, you might not be expecting me to say this, but I've been body shamed shopping for suits as well. I remember I was in a Moores in the mall trying to buy a suit for prom back in my high school days, and I was there with my dad, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna need something like I really like a tight fitting suit. Like I don't like the baggy pants, so we're gonna need something like really, really small. And the guy was like, "I'll say, look at you!" Like it was like,
the other way, like you're too
exactly,
you're too small.
Exactly. And my dad, it's like we're going somewhere else. Like we don't have to deal with this.
Yeah, really. It's and body shaming is kind of where we are at this point. So like, we go over to the husky corner, and Arthur has like basically nothing to choose from. He has to get this gaudy like car salesman outfit essentially, and the guy helping them is just like, yeah, that's the only thing we have in husky sized. And Arthur's like, husky? And he imagines himself at the end of the play, and he's like comically fat, and he's like bumping into everybody with his gut and sending them flying. And like we actually see the formation here of Arthur's like bodily dysmorphia. And trust me, like this if there's been one thing constant throughout this whole podcast, it's been like me, Will Young. It's like I relate to Arthur so much. And you want to talk about Arthur having body dysmorphia? Yeah, that's I don't know if you may not have seen like pictures of me. I'm a big guy. Like I don't want to get it all into it now, but like Arthur having body issues really speaks to me.
But it's interesting. The problem they set up here is kind of like it's kind of a weird storytelling device to kind of make Arthur have body dysmorphia, right? Because the only reason Arthur's anxious about fitting into this suit, I mean, he's anxious about being bigger in general because people start calling him husky and pointing it out. But the only reason he started to notice it is because of this suit. And the only reason he doesn't want to try the big suit on isn't because it's a big suit. It's because they made it ugly. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's tacky.
So it's kind of a weird narrative device because, like, let's if I mean, it's a cartoon, and if they didn't have this problem, there wouldn't be an episode.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting if you think about, like, let's say this situation was real, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, like, Arthur couldn't fit into the pants he always fitted, so he has to get, like, a bigger suit. If it was just kind of a regular-looking suit, it wouldn't be that much of a problem. Like,
yeah,
sure,
exactly.
he's all the same body dysmorphia stuff would stay. Like, oh, he's bummed out about having to go up a size. Like, that all holds true. But like, there wouldn't be this kind of like ticking clock element of like, oh, I don't want, like, you just buy bigger clothes. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
It makes, I feel like it kind of steals a little bit of the nuance from the story they're trying to tell. I think, especially with episodes, Arthur's so good at tackling so much more of these kind of mature subjects for kids. But I feel like this situation's kind of so fantastical, it kind of robs a little bit of the realism from this thing that, like you said, you went through it, and a lot of kids, I'm sure, go through.
Well, for sure, and we've talked. I feel like I've been the one to bring up before the fact that, like, Arthur's often portrayed as a kid who isn't inactive, but he has a big, like, sweet tooth. He, like, he eats cakes. He eats, like, he eats candy. Like, he does all that kind of stuff that is, I would think, fairly normal for a little kid, but also. And you kind of notice, I think we've brought up the fact before that the kids are not designed to be like. They always wear, like, the big bunchy sweaters, so they all kind of look like they have a little bit of baby fat on them. But none of them have been made out to be, like, the fat kid. And this is the first, I feel, maybe not the first, because I feel like maybe we've done that before with Binky, but this is the first time we're really digging into, like, oh, Arthur is a little bigger than the other kids. In fact, in the next scene, like, we make it very obvious of just, like, Arthur is playing soccer with Buster and Brain as they're rehearsing their lines for the play, and, like, Arthur runs out of breath. And then later on the sidelines, Buster is like, yeah, you've been looking, it's like, it's not that you're husky, it's just as there's a lot more of you all of a sudden. And it's just like, oh, okay, so Arthur is...
Arthur asks Buster, he's like, do you guys think I'm husky? And then we get this great delivery from Buster where he's like, husky? Husky? You? Husky? And then he, like, whispers to Braid, he's like, what's husky?
What's husky mean? And it's interesting also, we never use the word fat in this episode. And
well, not so much. Like,
did,
I think
did,
Arthur
did they,
asks...
Did they use fat?
Yeah, Arthur asks... that's actually some of the problems I have with this episode is it's kind of... Well, we'll get into it when we get into it, but I think at some point, Arthur... I think even in this conversation, Arthur asks Buster, he's like, do you guys think I'm fat?
Okay.
And that really stuck out to me. And then eventually, I think Mr. Rapper describes himself as he used to be a fatty rat.
Yeah. God. Okay.
But anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of more just dealing with facts here. So, Arthur really wants to fit into his suit pants so that he can wear the suit for the play. So Buster and Brain try to help him. Buster's like, what you might need to go on a diet. I'm an expert on diets. My mom's been on hundreds of them, which was really funny again to me because my mom is also the type of person. She is not fat by any stretch of the imagination, never has been, but she was on dozens of diets in the when I was a kid, and especially with the way there used to be a lot of fad diets, and I know there still is.
Yeah,
it's just
but it's very different. Like, that's funny. I guess we'll talk about this now. So, like, especially in, like, early 2000s media, even kids media, the way dieting is portrayed is totally kind of different than it is now. Like, now we have basically there's paleo people, there's ketogenic people,
there's flat tummy tea.
Well, which is BS, by the way.
Exactly.
Fun fact, the Flat Tummy Tea Company is in Halifax.
Really?
Yeah,
Whoa.
Absolutely. I don't want to name names, but I know people who used to work for that company.
God,
and they would have to send email. Yeah, we'll talk about it off pod, but they had to, like, send emails to, like, Sasha Banks or, like, Kourtney Kardashian or whatever to get these social media deals to promote Flat Tummy Tea. That's... but that is a Halifax company, believe it or not.
Wow.
Which I think because of Instagram's new guidelines might have some trouble soon. But what was I gonna say? My friends don't work for it anymore. But
about diets.
Oh yeah. So, like, but there, I think dieting, like even pop culture, the way we thought about dying used to be very, very different in the early 2000s.
Oh, big
like,
time.
There's this gag right here where Buster's kind of taking out all the stuff for all the different types of diets, and he's like, you can eat just nuts. It's like the Atkins diet, or like there used to be books of all these different like, and I think like with things like for instance, people who try to eat like ketogenic is kind of the one that I think is the most, it's not for health reasons unless you've been prescribed by a doctor to eat ketogenic. Like people who eat like gluten-free or stuff like that, it's usually for health reasons. Like they have to. Ketogenic's like the big one where people are doing it because it's a diet, right?
Yeah.
But that's not like a fad diet where you do it and then you stop, right? That's like something that's a lifestyle choice. You always eat ketogenic. You always are in ketosis. So that's kind of like what Buster talks about is when he's talking about his mom would go on these diets and then she would immediately gain all the weight back.
He specifically says it, like Arthur's like, well, which one of them should I do? He's like, it doesn't matter. None of them work. He just kind of matter-of-factly says that she always gets off them. And to the show's credit, I think this could have been way worse if they also didn't have Brain say, you should also never go on a diet if it's not specifically prescribed by your doctor.
Right. That's actually a really great point. He specifically talks about how kids should never go on diets. And this reminded me of, so my friends, I have a friend who he loves Zoe 101.
Okay.
And so he was doing a big Zoe 101 rewatch recently. And I walked in one time to him and his girlfriend's place. They were watching Zoe 101. And something that's really kind of like a fascinating sort of artifact of that show is like the way they talk about weight and girls' weights it seems super not this time. Like everyone's always talking about going on diets. Everybody's always talking about like, oh, I look fat. They're talking. That show's attitude towards weight is really, really toxic and odd, especially considering the audience. And I think that's something that kind of permeated media a lot more in the early 2000s.
Big time.
And I think this kind of shows, like, even throughout this Arthur episode, like, you're right, it's good that they got Brain to be like, you should eat a variety of foods. But even this episode is kind of guilty of, I think, misses the mark, or misses kind of the nuance that we come to expect now in terms of discussions about weight in media.
I agree.
I think it's not Arthur's fault. I think it's a product of its era. Like everything was like this.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm saving my kind of longer form thoughts on the way they tackle this for the end of the episode. So that's we keep saying we're gonna get to it. That's where I'm gonna get to it, because boy, do I have thoughts about this. Anyway, so we get into a bit of a montage here where DW's like, I will help you, not eat as many snack foods or whatever. So there's like, essentially DW's channeling her inner Jillian Michaels here. She's like, taking Arthur's cookies from him. She hides like a radio when Arthur's going for the chips and like, gets on the bullhorn to stop him from eating them. It's pretty extreme. I really liked to hear Arthur was like trying on his pants again. It's just like, I've tried all these things and nothing happened. And Brain's like, well, it's only been 3 hours. You need to try it for like a couple of weeks. So I thought that was pretty funny. But Arthur doesn't wear like a suit to dress rehearsal, and he kind of ends up talking to Mr. Ratburn about what he should do because he can't fit into the suit that he wants to wear. And Mr. Ratburn kind of brings up the exercise portion of things, where it's like when we actually get a flashback here. When Mr. Ratburn was young, he didn't really like to exercise until he discovered ping pong. And this is where we get him. He says, I was quite the fatty rat, and not crazy about that. Didn't like that.
No.
But what I did like is chubby little Mr. Ratburn. He's so adorable. Oh my God, this little flashback. And so this
is a little bit of a retcon too, because we've seen Mr. Ratburn at this age, like in the episodes about his sister and stuff, and he doesn't look like this.
No, but I think he still looks really cute. But yeah, he does discover ping pong as a kid, and over the years he gets so good at it, and that's how he kind of stays in shape. That's his main way to do it. So he found an exercise that worked for him. This eventually leads to Mr. Ratburn's class being given pedometers, which I don't know where we got the money for like over 20 pedometers for the class, but whatever. Let's hope that our schools get that much money in the future. so everybody takes their own. Essentially, a pedometer counts the steps that you take, and Arthur's very happy the next day because he took 800 steps. To which DW says, "I don't think I've taken 800 steps in my entire life."
So this moment is this whole like steps counting thing is the moment I had seen this episode before. And this is kind of the moment that stuck out in my head that I remembered from watching this episode as a child was the realization that 800 steps was not that many steps.
I mean, I also kind of got fooled. I was like, 800 steps does sound like a lot. But then Arthur goes to all of his friends, and they're like in the thousands or tens of thousands because like Muffy had dance class and Brain had soccer practice, which was kind of weird. I was like, if Brain had soccer practice, didn't Arthur also have soccer practice? But anyway,
good point.
And Buster's like, yeah, I didn't even do that much. I just followed my mom around while she did errands. And then we realized Arthur was kind of goofing off. He was like, he was playing fetch with Pal like from the couch. He did some leg exercises like on the floor. Like he wasn't as active as he thought that he was. So that's kind of a fun reveal. And of course, we do get the thing here of just like Mr. Ratburn essentially talking to the audience of just like, you should aim for 10,000 steps a day, but if you don't hit it, that's okay. Like just try again the next day. So again, could be worse in terms of like the exercise portion of this. It's like, okay, that's a reasonable target to hit if you're fairly active, and if you don't, that's okay. Like just keep trying, kind of thing. It's more of a suggestion than anything. It's like, I remember I had the best pedometer I ever had was the Pikachu, the Pika Pet.
Oh, hell yeah.
You wore that. You wore it on your belt clip, and it the more steps you took, the more happy Pikachu was.
I remember dudes would just shake them.
Yeah, totally.
They'd cheat.
Yeah, of course.
They'd walk around shaking the Pika Pet, yeah.
Why wouldn't you cheat? This is the era of, surfing Cinnabar Island to get unlimited rare candies. Why wouldn't you cheat? Totally. Arthur's kind of frustrated that he didn't hit his goal here, and he's watching Bionic Bunny with Buster, and there's like a portly robber that's running away from Bionic Bunny and doesn't get away because he like runs out of breath, and DW's like, hey, that's you, and Arthur's like, all right, that's it. And we get another montage of Arthur accepting healthier alternatives, let's say, to what he wants to get. So like,
so this is
healthier.
Yeah, this is another product of the time, right? Like,
yes.
So he goes up to an ice cream place and then he elects to get the frozen yogurt. And I feel like that was an early 2000s thing where people are like, oh, I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to have frozen yogurt instead of ice cream. I think now in 2020, we now know that the difference is probably negligible.
It's marginal. That's a good shout.
Dude, remember the Seinfeld episode where like Newman's like, I could eat this stuff all day, and the best part is I don't gain anyway. Like there's like an episode about frozen yogurt,
right,
where it's tackling this exact kind of discrepancy.
And instead of going to the sugar bowl to have like a soda or a milkshake or something, Buster gives him a bottle of water. Just kind of, again, healthier alternatives, which is not like it's not bad advice. And then Arthur also like turning the TV off to go like for a walk or some such thing. And then we get the final reveal of Arthur trying to put on his suit pants, and he finally fits into them, which, don't want to go into too much detail with this, but this is also an Arthur meme alert. The shot of Arthur pulling up his pants, or putting on his pants, DW covering her eyes. It's been some of the more, let's say, risque Arthur memes.
It's funny,
the ones that I don't share on Instagram.
It's funny because seeing this sequence in motion, you don't even think about that.
Right.
It's funny. Someone must have I always kind of wonder where those Arthur screen cap memes come from, because you do find that where there, when it rains it pours. Like that episode where the episode where the picture of Arthur kind of like drowning in the money. There's like 3 different Arthur memes that are from that episode. So I always assume that like someone watched one episode of Arthur and just tried to juice it for all the meme content they could.
Yeah. And essentially episode ends around here. We see Arthur in the school play. He reads his line perfectly well and takes a bow and feels good about himself. So
I wonder what this play is. It's kind of like a whodunit where there's like a ghost.
Yeah, it seems like maybe a Ratburn original, perhaps. Maybe he's like trying to backdoor his script in. All right, so that's the end of that one. We're gonna come back to that. We're just gonna get into the second half of the episode right after this. Support for Elwood City Limits is really easy. First of all, you can visit us and follow us on social media. You can go to facebook.com/Elwood City Limits. On Twitter, you can follow us at ECL Podcast. We're also on Tumblr, elwoodcitylimits.tumblr.com. You can also go to our Instagram, Elwood City Limits. Follow us over there too. You can also contribute to us on a monthly basis over at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. We have corresponding rewards for when we hit certain levels of patronage. So please, if you feel like you would like to donate financially to us, you're under no obligation to, but if you want to, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Also, if you want to have a little bit of ECL on your person, go to teespring.com/stores/Elwood-City-Limits-store. Make a little rhyme out of it. You can go over there and get a t-shirt, a hoodie, or a tank top with the Elwood City Limits logo on it. And we've got even more designs coming in real soon, so make sure to check back there. Finally, share this podcast with a friend who likes animation, who likes Arthur, or who just likes having fun. Sharing us on social media, sharing us with people you know, and sending in your emails to elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. All are fantastic ways to support us, and we thank you very, very much. Now, let's get back to the show. And we're back for the Law of the Jungle Gym. This one I had no idea what to expect. Again, never seen these before. So much to my surprise, Lucas, you made a lot of mentions of stuff that was the early 2000s all over. How about digital cameras?
Yeah, digital cameras, man. I mean, I think when we think about digital cameras, me and you think about the exact same thing, which is people going to WWE events with digital cameras. The Edge and Christian flash photography, like that's what I think of, is like that type of person like holding a digital camera. I haven't thought about a digital camera in a really long time, and I feel like we're getting even farther and farther from that. Like the people don't even like want DSLRs anymore. They just want to have like old school film photography so they can scan the pictures and put those on Instagram.
Right. And I mean, you're speaking of cameras at wrestling shows, I just dug up the first photos that I ever took at a wrestling show with a disposable camera. Didn't even have a digital at the time. Do we need to explain what disposable cameras are? Do people...
No, this is what I'm talking about. I bought when my little sister got me a disposable camera for Christmas. They're coming back. It's like a fun, faux, like retro thing.
Okay, that's cool. I could actually get into that. But yeah, digital cameras, I remember I wanted one for so long, and it's funny looking back just how little I used it. Me personally, I'm not the greatest at like taking pictures. Like I just don't have I don't have the instinct, the camera instinct. But we see here Muffy brings in her brand new digital camera, and she wants to take photos of everything and everybody. So she was going to take a group picture of all of the normal Arthur cast, but she goes up a little too far in the jungle gym, and she runs into Molly and the tough customers. It's a tough customer episode, baby.
Well, not only is it a tough customer episode, it's a Muffy episode, and already, this was, again, to speak to wrestling, this is like watching two, it's like seeing two characters you never expected to cross paths in the Royal Rumble. Daniel Bryan standing up to Brock Lesnar in the Royal Rumble or something. This was a kind of conflict that I never expected.
No, and you know something? I liked it. Like I
marked out. I was let's get into it. So Buffy doesn't put up with the tough customers. Like,
no, she gets right up to them.
They try to pull their typical routine that they're gonna pound her. And Muffy is unfazed, to which the kids literally, like, again, they mark out too. They start cheering and chanting Muffy. We get a little bit more
wrestling.
I love Binky's dynamic in this episode. So Binky is still doing this kind of two live shtick where he's good friends with the whole Arthur crew, but it seems like at recess he hangs out with the tough customers. Yeah. And he's still trying to not let on that he's good friends with the younger kids. So he's always like kind of making little asides to being like, Molly, like, just like, Muffy didn't mean it. We got to leave her alone. Or like, hey, Muffy, you got to don't say that. Like, Molly's really serious. Like,
Yeah.
And so that is an incredible role for Binky. But already, it was interesting to see immediately, like, this is immediately apparent. I don't want to get too far into like my feelings on the overall episode, but it was immediately apparent. Like, I think this is the most I've ever liked Muffy in any episode.
Interesting.
Because it's just cool. Like, she's still being herself. But it's one of those things where I never really thought about, where it's like, yeah, Muffy, like, what does Muffy care if the tough customers are like, I'm going to beat you up? She's going to sue them. So it's not necessarily like, neither Muffy nor the tough customers are being reasonable or is kind of the hero in this story. It's just interesting to watch them interact and be like, it's the immovable force and the unstoppable object.
Well, and when you put two heels in front of each other, it's like one of them eventually has to play the baby face, and it's like Muffy just through sheer, like, audacity of standing up to them is just like, oh wow, this is like a dynamic, like you said, we've never seen before. So there is a real novelty to it. By the way, the jungle gym, the top of the jungle gym is called the Tower of Pain by the tough customers. It's apparently where they've always kind of hung out, and we've seen that before. They've kind of done that in the past. So they try to kind of intimidate her. They like, trip her and all that kind of stuff. It's Binky, Molly, Rattles, and Slink, who is in the episode where they wanted Arthur to eat the bug. Slink's kind of
Rattles and Slink playing a much smaller role in this episode than they've done in other Tough Customers episode. Like, Rattles and Slink are essentially the comic relief.
Right, and they're the Toka. Why did I think Toka and Razor? Like, I didn't even say the Bebop and Rocksteady. That's who they are. The tough customers. We get like the start of a running joke here where Molly will threaten something and it'll all be drowned out except for the end. So by like a loud noise or something. So she's drowned out. The last words you hear are pretzel and a bungee cord.
And that's kind of a running joke throughout this episode, is Buffy going on kind of a long... Molly. I'm going to do that a lot this episode.
Yeah,
Molly going on a long tirade and then like being drowned out by something in the background.
So the next day, like, Muffy stands firm. Like, she's going to use the jungle gym. In fact, a lot of kids are using the jungle gym when they first come out, and the tough customers have to scare them off. But Muffy isn't intimidated. So a couple notes here. First of all, Rattles has a line reading here that is very New York. He's like, "Hey, there's that kid what was taking the pictures."
Rattles is such a joy in this episode.
Yeah. Also, I have a fun fact. So he only gets about, I'd say, maybe 3 lines. But so Slink, voiced by the original voice of Arthur, Michael Yarmish.
No, that's crazy. I love that.
You can actually kind of hear it. Like, it's like an older Arthur voice, essentially. But yeah, that's Michael Yarmish. That's where he kind of comes back into the show. So it's good to hear from him again. So they kind of put her, quote unquote, in prison. Like, Slink and Rattles put their arms together and go ka-ching, and like lock her up.
Muffy really puts into stark contrast that, like, we're so used to the tough customers being this intimidating presence. They're wearing leather jackets and denim jackets, and they're like the skater kids. They're like the kids are rough around the edges, you're scared of on the playground. But once Buffy just says no to them, it really, like, takes the edge away. Like seeing Rattles and Slink go ka-chong and link their arms around Muffy to put her in this, like, fake prison is, like, it's totally hilarious and, like, completely harmless.
Well, Binky is kind of the most revealing part of the fact that the tough customers, both by virtue of the show, but also in their characters as well, are very much paper tigers of just, as my friend likes to say, they're meant to look intimidating, but the more you kind of, interact with them, the less intimidating and the more understandable they come across. And that kind of happens with Molly throughout this episode especially. So her and Muffy are kind of at loggerheads. Muffy wants to use the top of the jungle gym, and Molly is very insistent that it's their territory and will not budge on that. Neither of them will. So
Muffy even tries to, she tries to be very Machiavellian. She attempts to pay for use of the jungle gym area.
$5.
Yeah, and this is when we realize that it might be something more than simply Molly trying to kind of keep hold of her territory or keep putting on airs to his pure tough or anything of the sort. This is where you're like, okay, maybe this spot, it means a little bit more to Molly because she's turning down the money and the rest of the tough customers are very eager to get their $5 split amongst, 4 people?
Yes. So eventually Muffy seeks litigation and
I loved this so much.
And Mr. Haney in order to get the jungle gym opened to everybody. It's also here that we officially get Molly's last name, Molly MacDonald, not McDonald, which is a very regional question that you have to ask sometimes.
That's right. Is she MacDonald by or is she a McDonald by?
So yeah, she literally gets
from Sydney from Glace Bay. Now, this whole scene where sort of just to see how deflated the tough customers can be when you simply say no to them. So these lawyers, like grown men lawyers, are serving papers to what is ostensibly how old's Molly? 9?
Probably. Let's like 8 or 9.
Yeah. So giving
let's say 9. Let's say 9.
Yeah, because I think So serving papers to a 9-year-old, which is so excessive, and then we get Mr. Haney and in his best like clueless kind of principle, like he's been totally kind of oblivious to this dynamic of the tough customers ruling this jungle gym. The tough customers have probably not let anyone use this jungle gym for as long as they've been at this elementary school. So possibly like 6 years, right? This has been going on, and probably no one has stood up to them until this point. And of course, typical like school faculty, like Mr. Haney has no idea this has been going on. He's like, why can't we all just use the jungle gym?
Let's all try to have fun.
I loved this scene so much.
Muffy does get to use the jungle gym a bit more, but the tough customers try and essentially get her to leave. Muffy's like setting up a portrait studio, like a modeling studio on the top of the jungle gym. So she's like trying out outfits on like Jenna and Buster. And the joke, of course, is that Muffy takes really terrible pictures. You know, they accidentally spray soda in Muffy's face, or like they wreck up her. They accidentally interfere with her shoot. There's actually another Arthur meme alert here where during this montage Buster is like modeling like a leather jacket, sunglasses, and a scarf, and he does like a little strut, and I've definitely seen that strut in GIF form. You could probably find that on like Twitter GIFs or something.
Is this where they're arguing over the music? Where
yes,
Molly is all stoked because the new Mutakrude. It sounds like something Alex Moore would listen to. The new Mutakrude album comes out, but Muffy's kind of drowning it out with the disco she's playing for the runway shoot. And I forget who says it, if it's Rattles or Binky, but someone says, "How come we never listen to disco?"
Binky says that, and it's such a great question. I wrote that down too. I loved it. They kind of cause havoc at the scene. Molly's really bummed that Muffy's kind of taken over, and then the tough customers are hanging out outside the mall, and Binky's like,
this is their new spot.
Yeah, it's like, why don't we just hang out here instead? And Slink has Rattles by the ankles, and Rattles is trying to like dig for a quarter in a dumpster. But Molly is very against this. She's like, no, we've always had that place. And then Binky's like, let's all vote on it. And everybody but Molly votes to stay at the front of the mall.
We get some good comedy with Rattles in the dumpster. Someone like throws the wrong type of garbage in, and Rattles like yells from the dumpster. It's like, hey, that's plastic.
Paper only. Can't you read? And we see them basically doing their same tough customer stuff at the front of the mall, but just Molly's not into it. She's not having it. We finally get a little bit of a moment here between Molly and Muffy as Muffy comes back onto the jungle gym, and Molly's just like, we've been here. We've had this territory for as long as we've been here. So nothing else feels the same. So like tries to appeal to Muffy, but Muffy is not having it. Eventually, I think it comes to pass that like Muffy takes a look at her photos and realizes they aren't that good.
Yeah.
And Molly also pays a house call to Muffy, and Muffy like hides under the table so as not to be seen.
Right, so Muffy's talking to her dad, and she's like, have you ever thought you wanted something, but then once you got it, it wasn't quite what you wanted? incredible line from Muffy's dad where he's like, "Oh, Pumpkin, I know exactly what you mean. Here's $20. Go back to wherever you got whatever you wanted from, and ask them for twice as much of whatever it was."
Yeah.
So completely misreading the situation. And then we get more comedy with Molly ringing the doorbell and Muffy hiding under the table and telling her dad to tell her, make something up. Muffy's dad actually goes through with it, and he goes, "She moved to Paris to study astronomy." And then Molly sees through that and goes, "Could you just tell her when she's ready to talk to come out from under the table?"
Right. And that's kind of where Molly lays it out for her about, so Muffy doesn't budge, but she initially doesn't budge, but then I think, they kind of come to an understanding of like, my photos aren't turning out too terribly well. I don't really want it anymore. So how are we going to get this back to normal without either of us kind of losing face? Like without, Muffy admitting defeat or like Molly admitting defeat or what have you. So they actually come up with this idea where they get into like this kind of showy fight, again, kind of like wrestling, where they get into this argument, and Binky is the part I loved about this is Binky is the guy who's like essentially setting up the scene. Like he calls everybody over, just like, "Molly and Muffy are in an argument, I think they're gonna fight." And as they're kind of having their disagreement, and Muffy's eventually like, "You know what, I don't want to be here anymore," and quote unquote stands up to Molly. And Binky, I love Binky's stage voice. He's used this before when he's been like in school plays and stuff, but he's just like, "Wow, Muffy, that was very brave of you."
And what's even great about that is like Francine is like having a conversation with this fake Binky where Francine's acting completely like herself, and she's like just kind of like confused. She's like, yeah, okay, and then Binky's like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah, he's like really laying it on thick, but he's just not a good enough of an actor. And then, that's how they restore the balance of the jungle gym there. And the episode ends with like Molly just being happy that everything's back to normal. There was kind of like the motif of this cat that kind of hung around the tough customers, and you kind of see it in some scenes here, and the cat kind of comes back and everything's back to normal essentially. All right. So I want to do things just a tiny bit differently today. Lucas, do you mind if I talk about Arthur Weighs In first?
Of course.
Okay.
No, of course I don't mind.
All right. So I don't think this is a bad episode. I think that it's in terms of like a topic to speak on. This is something that I'm glad they at least tried to address. And I think that there's funny parts to it. There's like interesting animation. I love the animation on like Arthur the Blob in the cold open. I think that was really cool to look at. I also think that we spoke about the fact that this is very of its time, and so I'm really trying to keep it in that context of like in back during this time, Lucas already talked about it a lot, but like the diet culture and how it was like very, very prevalent of like being fat is bad. So, which is why initially, Lucas, I'm glad you caught this, of just like how they didn't use the word fat. Even if they used it, they didn't use it more than like once or maybe twice. And they kind of got around it with like husky or there's more of you. And that's the part that I really, really didn't like. And I think it kind of actually makes me feel better about the media that we have these days. And I'm speaking about media that's very body positive, because what I was waiting for this whole episode, and we've already said this as well, I don't think that they said anything bad, but it's kind of what they didn't say that hung a bit heavier for me. So like eating right, like having, a lot of variety in your diet, eating fruits and vegetables and all that stuff, and getting proper exercise, good, very good. I'm all for that, and I think that's an important lesson to teach kids. But I also think that we're at a point now, and of course this episode's more than 15 years old. This isn't something I begrudge them, but when you're not talking about how like, hey, it's okay to have a different body shape than other people, like that's something that is still being fought for today.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was talking about earlier with the different colored suit, right? Like I feel like if this episode came out today, he would buy the bigger suit and it wouldn't be crazy looking. And then it'd be like, okay, problem solved. I went up a pant size.
Well, and we've also had, like, I'm thinking of characters like Bobby Hill from King of the Hill, who is like, you know, he's a husky. I think they even call him Husky in the show, but he's a fat kid, but he's rarely the butt of the joke for that. Like, he owns who he is, and I think that's a positive example. So not that it wasn't being done at all at the time. So it's a little disappointing that, you know, Arthur's I use body dysmorphia, and I don't know if I should use that lightly, so I'll just say his anxiety about his weight and his appearance is never really solved in a way that I think is meaningful. It's, you know, it's communicative, like, oh, Arthur ate better and he exercised and so he wasn't fat anymore. And it's just like, but that's not real. Like, that's not always the case.
It's exemplified kind of like by how they don't draw Arthur differently. No. This is kind of something we've talked about before, even early episodes of Arthur. You know, you've talked before about how, and it's funny, this kind of speaks to our different perspectives of when we were watching it as kids, but you always talked about how you kind of related to that aspect of Arthur, that he was ostensibly in the show supposed to be kind of a bigger guy. They talk about how he eats all the time. That was kind of the only way they've referenced his weight before, but they never really drew him different than the other kids, whereas it was kind of that kind of thing where you saw that in the show, but I didn't even realize that was a layer to Arthur's character until you kind of pointed out to me as an adult, right? I had not seen this. Well, I guess I had seen this episode before, but I didn't remember it too well besides the steps part. But it had never occurred to me that Arthur was supposed to be like any bigger than the other kids. And it might have been because I didn't really have the life experience to relate to that, right? So I think in this case, and apologies for the pun, this is not intentional, but they're kind of trying to have their cake and eat it too. In the sense that they're trying to do a lesson, but, you know, do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, and you think about the fact that, like, we have a character on the show who eats all the time. That's his character, and always stays the same size except for, like, a joke here and there, and that's Buster. So they kind of... It doesn't so much...
The haters are...
The anti-fat alarm.
The fat phobia alarm is a going off. Is that just like a fire alarm?
It's like a smoke alarm or something.
Okay, we're good.
I think we're okay.
That's the first for the show. I was like, oh, are we gonna have to wrap this one up? I really wanted to talk about Law of the Jungle, Jim.
Yeah, for real. So. And we also have a character on the show. Like, it's not that we don't talk about different body or represent different body types. There's Binky, who I would say is also like likely an overweight kid, but he's also just big. He's big for his age, and that's never really been an issue. And now we have this thing where, like, Arthur, we have to kind of invent this thing for Arthur where all of a sudden he's fat and he's aware of it and he wants to not be fat anymore. And so I'm still dealing with this. Not this Arthur episode, because I didn't see this when I was a kid, and I'm kind of glad I didn't. But I'm still dealing with the fact that, like, I grew up with my mother who was very into dieting and saw herself as fat even though she is not. And so that, in a way, not blaming her for this, but in a way that kind of passed down to me, is that I do deal with body dysmorphia, where I look at myself all the time. And it's taken a long time, and thankfully also a very understanding and loving partner who is also fat and accepts that part of herself and loves that part of herself. And I'm still on that journey of accepting who I am and loving who I am, even though my body doesn't maybe look the way that I want it to. And it's taken a lot of years to kind of deprogram the fact that, like, fat is not bad. We all have different body shapes. I might never have the amazing, you know, wrestler type body that I wish I had, because that's just not who I am. And it's better, instead of, sorry about the smoke alarm, everybody. It's better instead of trying to change that than to accept it. And instead of trying to change my body, I'm trying to change my mind. And I feel like it's disappointing when I have TV shows that are like, again, I think coming from a good place of, like, eat healthy and exercise.
Eating healthy and exercise is indeed, like, to take this body conversation out of it, like, removed from that, good things for a kid's show to say. is to eat healthy and exercise, apropos of nothing, right? Like,
and that's its own reward. Like, no matter what size you are, it feels good to eat healthy and exercise. And even though it absolutely sucks to do that sometimes, it's true. Like, you do feel better after doing that. But here it's like it was directly linked to not the consequence, but like the advantage of, if you do that, then you won't be fat. With the underlying message being, because being fat is bad.
In 3 weeks, too, right? Like, he goes down a pant size in 3 weeks of walking more. And walking more and eating frozen yogurt, and he goes down a pant size.
And it would be worse if they didn't say, you know, the line from Brain of like, kids definitely shouldn't go on a diet if they aren't ordered to by their doctor. So I hope you understand where I'm coming from with that. And again, I'm not trying to hold this older cartoon to standards that we have now, because this is we're still figuring this out.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't. Sorry, I'm almost done.
Yeah,
I can't lie that I was really disappointed with the underlying message at work here, and I'm glad that I'm at a place now where I can see it and I can be critical of it. So, episode wasn't bad. The underlying message was. I don't think it's their fault. I don't think it was their intention. It's just kind of the way things were, and that's disappointing.
I mean, I kind of talked through it with you kind of during this conversation, my feelings of the episode. I mean, just to close the book on it briefly, I just think that it's just clunky. Like, it's really kind of inelegant, I think, the way they kind of tackle this subject. And that's what I think, for me, what makes it disappointing is that usually I'm kind of surprised. Like, think about Grandpa's farm and how complicated and nuanced and kind of adult the themes in that episode are, and kind of how much they nail it. And that episode's even older, and sure, it's kind of a different it's a very different subject matter, but I think that it's interesting to see. I think we expect a lot of this show, even given its age, right? And so we're so used to it really nailing these things, where other kids shows at the time can't even do that. So I think that's why this episode really sticks out, in that you do see its age, and you kind of do see that it is a product of the era it was made, and that's kind of unusual for Arthur, and so I think that's why it stands out as clunky.
Yes, and I think you described it very well, and it's a situation that's very close to me, and I'm still kind of working out my feelings with it, and like I said, I'm glad that I kind of am able to have this opinion about it. So, and I'm glad that we were able to talk about it, because I think that you made a lot of good points, Lucas, and I'm glad that you did. So what did you think of Law of the Jungle Gym?
Law of the Jungle Gym might be my favorite Arthur episode we've seen in like 3 seasons.
Wow.
I was over the moon with Law of the Jungle Gym. I was enjoying it, like, every second of it, in a way I haven't enjoyed an Arthur episode since like the first 4 seasons. I loved it, and I loved it for a bunch of different reasons. So I was so into kind of this. I loved kind of seeing the veneer of the tough customers get shattered by Muffy, of all people, and I loved seeing Muffy's character being used for something where, you know, instead of being insufferable, Muffy's still being Muffy. That's what's interesting about this, is it's not like they changed who Muffy was, but they recontextualized Muffy to be like, oh, what's it like when this person, who doesn't take anything from anybody to the point where it's kind of annoying, interacts with these people who are ostensibly bullies. And I thought that was a really, really fascinating dynamic, and I think it's really funny. I think the way Binky is used in this episode is one of the kind of best uses of Binky. It's so funny to watch him kind of play both sides and keep his friendship with the kids, but also come off as tough. Rattles is hilarious in this episode. There's so many funny lines in this episode, both from Buster and Rattles, and what's the other guy's name again?
Slink.
Slink. all the stuff with like the lawyers, all the stuff with Mr. Haney, even the sequence at the end. There's so many sequences in this episode, so many interactions, very wrestling-esque, that like really stick out in my mind. Like Muffy's first confrontation with Molly and kind of the kids cheering, like they're so jubilant that someone's sticking up for the tough customers. The kind of montage of the tough customers hanging out at the mall, Muffy kind of approaching Molly kind of approaching Muffy at her house, and that whole interaction. I loved this episode. I really, really did. And I think it's an episode that I hadn't remembered that well. I had a vague memory of like seeing Muffy take pictures before, but this is really going to be a standout one for me, I think, for a while now.
I'm glad that you liked it, that you loved it so much, and I also am glad that you brought up the whole wrestling thing, because now I can't unsee you really talked about this, but it's just like, yeah, you take someone who's essentially a heel, but you recontextualize them in a situation where that's what makes them bad is also what makes them good, and you don't portray the character that way. So it's really cool how they managed to do that. I liked it fine. I'm definitely not as hot on it as you are, but I liked it fine. It was a really interesting kind of wrinkle to the tough customers character. I've really appreciated how, I mean, we really deepened the character of Binky almost very early on in the show, and now we're kind of spreading that around to some more of the tough customers, specifically Molly. And I think Molly has always been very visually interesting, and I'm excited for her to be interesting as a character, as a personality. So this really helped to kind of push that forward. And like you said, this is a great episode where we don't have to dislike Muffy. In fact, I really liked how her biggest negative aspect became one of her biggest positive ones, of just she doesn't take any crap from anybody, and it's great. Yeah, and just some of the humor around that was really good. I wasn't as engaged with it all the way, but I appreciate what it was going for. So yeah, I liked it fine. And yeah, so I'm glad we were able to kind of have these opinions about the show, and I'm glad that Arthur can still kind of evoke these kind of discussions in us so many years on.
I mean, that's why we're still doing this, right?
You're darn tootin', and still doing it we will be. So Lucas, in case you or anybody else didn't know, we're going to be starting up our new Patreon exclusive show starting up next week.
That's right. So if you want to see that or hear that, you got to subscribe to the Patreon. And it's kind of doing two things, because not only do you get to hear us talk about all sorts of PBS cartoons, not just Arthur with the new Patreon show, you are also helping towards the goal, which I assume is every Patreon subscriber's goal, of making Will go see the Sonic movie. Not only that, but I'm going to be seeing it either way, but I'm not allowed to talk about it unless we get the 40 Patreon subscribers. So we're 9 people away. You got about 8 days before the movie's in theaters, and a little bit longer while it's in theaters. Get on it.
So yeah, next week it's going to be a Patreon only release. We're going to be talking about, I mean, how could we, it's a Patreon show about PBS Kids that also doesn't have a title yet. Lucas, I'm going to need your help thinking of a title for that show. You don't have to think of it right now, but if you have any ideas, let me know. So how could we not spend the first episode talking about the Arthur spinoff, Postcards from Buster? And I'll tell you, Lucas, and the entire world, the episode we're going to be talking about, how could we not talk about Postcards from Buster? And if it's Postcards from Buster, how could we not talk about, and this is from a suggestion from one of our patrons, the episode where they go to Roswell, New Mexico.
Ooh, that's call up Joe Rogan. We're getting into the aliens. Call up Tom DeLonge.
And then in the next free ECL episode, we are going to be talking about Buster's Green Thumb and My Fair Tommy. So it looks like a Buster episode and a Tibbles episode. And, gee, I wonder what the Tibbles episode is about. I actually might have seen that one before. Well, thanks, everybody, for joining us for this one. And thank you very much to everybody who has subscribed to the Patreon and continues to support us. If you don't know why that is so important right now, check out last week's episode, the Mailbag episode. I talk about it there. And but we also just appreciate you no matter if you are a patron or if you listen for free every week. Thanks to everybody for the emails and the feedback. It's always very much appreciated. My name's Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini...
Go ahead. I already downloaded everything.
We'll see you next time.